The moment my mother looked at me in that hearing room and called me nothing, everyone expected me to break. What they didn't know was that I had already spent years building the evidence that would quietly destroy every lie they told about me. My brother avoided my eyes. My father stayed silent. The family lawyer smiled like the case was already over. And then the mediator opened my file, and suddenly nobody in the room could speak. Because the daughter they treated like a failure was actually the one person trained professionally to expose fraud, manipulation, and financial deception. And the worst part? My own family never cared enough to even ask who I became. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, leave a like on this video. Not for the algorithm, but because stories like this remind people they're not imagining the pain. And before we start, comment one word that describes how betrayal feels to you. I want to see how many people have lived through something similar without ever saying it out loud. Now let me tell you how my family spent 30 years underestimating me, right until the moment they realized I had documented everything. Most people in my office thought I liked being alone. Maybe I did. I spent my days inside gray federal buildings reviewing fraud reports, tracing fake transactions, and studying the tiny details people overlooked when they lied. Numbers made sense to me in ways people never did. Numbers always left patterns. Families left scars. Every Thursday after work, I drove 2 hours to see my grandmother Eleanor. I brought groceries, sorted her medications, fixed whatever was broken in the house, and listened to her stories while rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. She was the only person who ever asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. One night, while I was washing dishes, she looked at me quietly and asked, "Does your mother still pretend not to see you?" I froze with my hands underwater. Because somehow, even after all those years, she still noticed everything. My mother, Diane Bennett, had spent most of my life speaking about me like I was a temporary inconvenience she never learned how to love correctly. At family gatherings, she introduced my brother Tyler like he was proof she had succeeded as a parent. Former college athlete. Beautiful wife. Great salesman. The kind of man people naturally admire, she used to say proudly. Then her eyes would slide toward me. "And Claire works with paperwork or something." Paperwork. I investigated financial crimes for the government. But she had never once asked what I actually did. My father, Richard, rarely disagreed with her anymore. He just stayed quiet at the dinner table, staring at his plate while Tyler soaked up every conversation in the room. And after enough years, silence stopped feeling accidental. It started feeling deliberate. The first time I realized how little my family noticed me, I was 26. My grandmother had just started dialysis treatments, and I quietly began paying part of her medical expenses every month. I never told anyone. Not because I wanted credit, but because I already knew nobody would care enough to ask. A few months later, we were having dinner at my parents' house when my mother suddenly praised Tyler for always being there for family. I remember looking down at my glass so nobody would see my expression. Tyler hadn't visited Grandma Eleanor in almost 4 months. Then my mother smiled at me politely and asked, "Claire, do you still work at that little office?" That little office. I had spent the entire morning helping federal attorneys prepare a multimillion-dollar fraud case. And somehow, my own mother still thought I was insignificant. The humiliation that stayed with me the longest happened on my grandmother's 78th birthday. I had spent the entire morning decorating her backyard, cooking her favorite food, and setting up oxygen equipment beside her chair so she could stay outside longer. Tyler arrived 2 hours late carrying a grocery store cake and somehow still became the center of attention the second he walked in. My mother kissed his cheek and announced loudly, "At least one of my children knows how to show up for people." I actually felt the words hit me physically. Grandma Eleanor looked furious. She opened her mouth to defend me, but I touched her hand gently under the table. I didn't want another argument. Then my mother laughed softly and added, "Claire only visits because she likes acting morally superior." Nobody corrected her. Not Tyler. Not my father. Not even me. But that night, while washing dishes alone in Grandma's kitchen, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I started keeping records of everything. When Grandma Eleanor died, the funeral felt strangely performative. My mother cried loudly. Tyler stood near the casket shaking hands like he was hosting an event. My father avoided looking at me completely. Meanwhile, I could still remember the smell of antiseptic from the hospital room where I had held Grandma's hand 3 nights earlier while she slept. They hadn't been there. Not one of them. A week later, the attorney called us for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting anything. Honestly, I only wanted to survive the afternoon. Then the attorney cleared his throat and announced that Grandma had left the entire house to me. The room changed instantly. Tyler looked stunned. My father's face drained of color. And my mother. My mother stared at me with a level of hatred I had never seen before. Then the attorney unfolded one final handwritten note from Grandma Eleanor. She was the only one who stayed. The lawsuit arrived 11 days later. My mother claimed Grandma Eleanor had been mentally confused when she changed the will. Tyler signed a supporting statement. My father quietly joined the petition without ever calling me first. According to their attorney, I had manipulated a vulnerable old woman for financial gain. I read the accusation 3 times in my apartment kitchen while cold coffee sat untouched beside me. Manipulated. The word made my chest tighten. For years, I had protected my family from embarrassment by staying silent. I never corrected their lies. Never exposed their absence. Never defended myself publicly. And somehow, they had mistaken my silence for weakness. That night, I opened the storage boxes in my closet. Inside were receipts, letters, tax records, bank transfers, hospital schedules, handwritten birthday cards, and 15 years of carefully organized proof. I stared at the boxes for a long time before whispering something I had never admitted out loud before. They're going to regret this. I didn't respond to the lawsuit right away. That surprised even me. Instead, I went to work the next morning like nothing had changed. I sat in meetings about fraud networks, listened to people lie with confidence, and watched patterns form in real time. The difference was, now I was seeing my own family the same way. A system built on repetition. Assumptions. Blind trust in their own version of reality. My mother always needed a villain. My brother always needed to be the hero. My father needed silence so he wouldn't have to choose. And I had been assigned the role of a nothing, because it kept everything balanced. That evening, I called a colleague from legal compliance and asked a very specific question about admissible financial documentation in inheritance disputes. I didn't mention my family. But as I hung up, I realized something had already shifted inside me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. At first, it looked like they were winning. My mother started telling relatives I was mentally unstable and obsessed with money. Tyler repeated her words almost verbatim at a family dinner I wasn't invited to. My father stayed consistent in the only way he knew how, by saying nothing at all. Meanwhile, their lawyer filed motion after motion, painting me as someone who had isolated an elderly woman for personal gain. And I stayed quiet. That silence made them bolder. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't retreating. I was observing everything. Every statement they repeated. Every inconsistency in their timeline. Every emotional exaggeration they relied on instead of facts. In my job, people always talk too much when they're confident they're right. And my mother was becoming very confident. Too confident. She just didn't realize confidence leaves patterns a trained mind can trace. I started building the case the way I always did at work, quietly, without noise, without ego. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't argue. I simply collected. Bank statements showing every transfer I made to Grandma Eleanor over years. Utility bills I had paid under her name. Pharmacy receipts for her medication. Maintenance invoices for her house repairs that my family never bothered to fund. And then there were the letters. Dozens of handwritten pages from her, thanking me for showing up when others didn't. Each one dated, each one consistent, each one proving she was fully aware of what I did for her. The most important part wasn't the volume of evidence. It was the pattern. Because patterns don't lie. People do. And slowly, I started to see exactly where their story would collapse, if I placed the right document in the right moment. I just needed access to the hearing file first. My first move wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. I requested the complete probate file through legal channels, citing my role in federal financial investigations. No emotion. No explanation. Just authority. It arrived 3 days later. While my mother was telling people I was building a fantasy case, I was reading every page of their accusation line by line, marking contradictions they didn't realize they had written into the record. Then I did something they never expected. I cross-referenced their statements with my own financial logs and Grandma Eleanor's medical timeline. The gaps were immediate. Impossible gaps. My mother claimed Grandma was confused and dependent. But her medical records showed consistent cognitive clarity, documented by licensed professionals right up to the month she changed the will. I highlighted everything. Because now the story wasn't just false. It was provably false. The complication came faster than I expected. My mother's lawyer submitted an emergency motion claiming I was tampering with evidence and trying to intimidate witnesses. It was a defensive strike, meant to shift attention away from their inconsistencies. But the real problem wasn't the accusation. It was the judge's reaction. He ordered a preliminary review of all my submitted documents before the hearing date. That meant everything I had prepared could now be examined early, without context, without explanation. If even one document was misinterpreted, my entire position could collapse before I ever spoke. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by files spread across the floor. For the first time, I felt something close to pressure. Not fear. Responsibility. Because now it wasn't just about proving the truth. It was about making sure the truth survived being read by the wrong eyes first. I made a decision I didn't enjoy. I would have to step closer to my family again. Not emotionally. Not personally. Strategically. I called my aunt, the only relative who still spoke to both sides without taking a clear position, and asked a simple question about whether she still had any of Grandma Eleanor's old correspondence stored away. She hesitated too long before answering. That told me everything. When I finally met her at a quiet cafe, she slid an envelope across the table without looking at me. Inside were copies of letters I had never seen before. In one, Grandma wrote about how proud she was that I never needed to be seen to do what was right. My hands stayed steady, but my throat tightened. Because now I had something even stronger than financial proof. I had intent. And intent is what destroys the confused elderly woman argument completely. My mother just didn't know it was already over. The hearing day arrived with a strange kind of stillness, like the air itself was waiting. My mother sat across from me with perfect posture, already performing grief. Tyler leaned back like a spectator. My father avoided my eyes. Their lawyer opened his folder with confidence that almost looked rehearsed. Then it was my turn. I placed my file on the table. No emotion. Just structure. Bank transfers. Tax receipts. Medical confirmations. Maintenance records. And the letters, especially the ones showing Grandma Eleanor's clear reasoning about the house. The lawyer tried to interrupt. But the mediator raised a hand. "Let her finish," she said. I looked at my mother for the first time that day. And I realized she still thought this was about defending myself. It wasn't. It was about revealing what they had never bothered to understand. I opened the final document in my stack, and the room changed. The mediator read my file in silence at first. Then again, slower. I watched her eyes move over the bank transfers, monthly payments I had made for years to cover Grandma Eleanor's care. Then the utility bills in my name, the tax records showing I had been maintaining the house quietly since before the will was changed. When she reached the letters, she stopped entirely. One was read aloud, Grandma Eleanor stating she was fully aware and grateful for Claire's consistent support, and that she understood exactly what she was deciding. My mother leaned forward. She didn't understand what she was signing. That's when I handed over the medical reports. Neurologist confirmation. Cognitive evaluations. No impairment. The mediator looked up slowly. Then the final document, my federal credentials as a fraud investigator. My mother's face changed. For the first time, she wasn't speaking. The room didn't explode. It collapsed into silence. The mediator stated it clearly: there was no evidence of incapacity, no coercion, and no legal basis to challenge the will. Grandma Eleanor had been mentally sound, consistent, and fully aware. The letters confirmed intent. The medical records confirmed clarity. My financial trail confirmed years of independent support that no one in my family had ever matched or even questioned. The lawsuit was dismissed on the spot. My mother didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice wasn't angry anymore, just empty. "I thought you were nothing," she said quietly. "Because I didn't understand you. And I didn't want to." Tyler stood up first and left without a word. That was the last time I saw him. My father lingered outside the room, then walked away like he had no direction left to follow. No apology. Just absence, as always. But my mother stayed. Weeks later, she came to the house I inherited from Grandma Eleanor. Not as a challenger. Not as a performer. Just as a woman holding a small bag of gardening tools she didn't know how to use properly. We worked in silence for a while, pulling weeds from the garden Grandma loved. Eventually, she spoke. "She talked about you more than I realized," she said. I just never listened. I didn't tell her everything was forgiven. Because it wasn't. But I also didn't ask her to leave. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No perfect healing. Only truth finally spoken out loud after years of avoidance. The house stayed mine, legally and emotionally. The evidence never needed to be used again because it had already done its job. My family didn't get erased. They just stopped being the center of my life. And for the first time, I understood something simple. I was never nothing. I was just unseen by people who were never looking properly. As I stood in my grandmother's garden that evening, I finally asked myself a question I had avoided for years. If they had looked closer, would they have ever understood me at all? If this story stayed with you in any way, take a second to like the video so more people who've been through silence and misunderstanding can find it too. Subscribe if you want more stories about quiet strength, hidden truth, and the kind of justice that doesn't need noise to be real. And in the comments, tell me this: have you ever been underestimated by someone who never bothered to truly know you?